Echoes of spring. Spring break had always been a time of excitement and anticipation, a chance to escape the mundane routines of daily life and embrace the freedom of youth. But as my friends and I embarked on our journey to the secluded cabin in the woods, little did we know that our spring break would soon turn into a nightmare that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. As we arrived at the cabin, nestled deep in the heart of the forest, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. The air was thick with the scent of pine, and the trees seemed to loom ominously overhead, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, grasping at the sky. Ignoring my growing sense of dread, we unpacked our belongings and settled into the cabin, eager to begin our week of relaxation and adventure. But as night fell and darkness descended upon the forest, a feeling of unease crept into the edges of my mind, like shadows dancing just out of sight. That first night, as we sat around the crackling fire, sharing stories and laughter, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every rustle of the leaves outside, every snap of a twig sent a shiver down my spine, and I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, searching for something I couldn't name. As the days passed, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. Strange noises echoed through the forest at night, and I swore I could hear whispers carried on the breeze, though my friends dismissed them as the tricks of an overactive imagination. But then, one fateful night, as we sat around the fire, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be calling out to us, drawing us deeper into the darkness of the forest. Unable to resist their siren song, we ventured out into the night, our hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. As we stumbled through the underbrush, the forest seemed to close in around us, the trees twisting and contorting in the moonlight. I could feel eyes watching us from the shadows, unseen but ever present, and a sense of dread washed over me like a tidal wave. And then, suddenly, we stumbled upon a clearing in the forest, bathed in an eerie glow. In the center of the clearing stood a circle of ancient stones, weathered by time and overgrown with moss. And in the center of the circle lay a shallow grave, its earth freshly turned. As we stood frozen in horror, a figure emerged from the darkness, a spectre cloaked in shadows, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. It spoke to us in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth itself, commanding us to leave this place and never return. Terrified, we fled back to the safety of the cabin, our hearts racing with fear and adrenaline. But even as we locked the door behind us and huddled together for comfort, I knew that we had stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent, something that should have remained buried in the depths of the forest. As dawn broke the next morning, we wasted no time in packing our belongings and fleeing from the cabin, desperate to leave behind the horrors of that night. But as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the darkness of the forest was reaching out to claim us as its own. And as we returned to the safety of civilization, I knew that the echoes of that spring break would linger with me forever, a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates the world of the living from the realm of the dead. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me since that fateful spring break. The memory of the shadowy figure in the forest haunted my dreams, its voice echoing in the darkest corners of my mind. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination running wild, that there was a rational explanation for what we had witnessed. But deep down, I knew that there was something sinister lurking in the depths of the forest, something ancient and malevolent that defied explanation. As the months passed, I became increasingly obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the cabin in the woods. I scoured old newspaper archives and delved into local folklore, searching for any mention of the clearing or the mysterious figure that had driven us away. But the more I searched, the more elusive the answers became. It was as if the forest itself was guarding its secrets, hiding them away from prying eyes. and as I delved deeper into the darkness, I began to feel like I was being watched, like unseen eyes were following my every move. Then, one day, I received a package in the mail, a tattered journal, its pages yellowed with age, and its cover adorned with strange symbols. There was no return address, no note to explain where it had come from, but as I flipped through the pages, I realized that it held the key to unlocking the secrets of the forest. The journal belonged to a researcher who had visited the cabin decades earlier, drawn by rumors of strange happenings in the area. As I read through his entries, I felt a chill run down my spine. The things he described were eerily similar to what my friends and I had experienced. According to the journal, the clearing in the forest was the site of an ancient ritual, a ritual performed by a cult that worshipped a powerful entity, the Shadow Stalker. The cult believed that by offering sacrifices to the Shadow Stalker, they could gain untold power and immortality. But the ritual had gone horribly wrong, unleashing the Shadow Stalker from its prison and condemning the forest to eternal darkness. The researcher had witnessed the aftermath of the ritual, the twisted forms of the cultists lying dead in the clearing, their bodies contorted and mangled beyond recognition. As I read on, my heart pounding in my chest, I realized that the figure we had encountered in the forest was none other than the Shadow Stalker itself, a malevolent spirit that had been unleashed upon the world by the folly of mankind. Armed with this new knowledge, I knew that I had to confront the Shadow Stalker once and for all, to put an end to the darkness that had consumed the forest and threatened to consume us all. But as I prepared to return to the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap, that the Shadow Stalker was waiting for me, biding its time until it could claim me as its next victim. Echoes of the Abyss. Spring break, the time of year when students flock to beaches and resorts, seeking a brief respite from the rigors of academia. For me and my friends, it was no different. We had been planning our getaway for months, eager to escape the monotony of lectures and textbooks. Our destination was a secluded cabin unrolled deep in the woods, far away from the chaos of tourist traps and crowded beaches. It seemed like the perfect getaway, a chance to unwind, reconnect with nature, and make memories that would last a lifetime. Little did we know, our spring break would become a nightmare beyond our wildest imaginations. As we drove deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around us, casting long shadows that danced in the fading light. A sense of unease settled over me, but I brushed it off as nothing more than pre-trip jitters. The cabin was rustic, but cozy, with a crackling fire and comfortable beds awaiting us. We settled in quickly, eager to start our vacation in earnest. But as night fell and the forest grew silent, a feeling of dread crept over us like a thick fog. It started with subtle noises, a twig snapping in the distance, the rustle of leaves outside our window. We laughed it off at first, chalking it up to the natural sounds of the wilderness. But as the night wore on, the noises grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to be coming from all around us. We tried to ignore it, to lose ourselves in card games and laughter, but the tension was palpable. Something was out there in the darkness, watching us, waiting. Then, just as we were about to retire for the night, it happened, the sound of scratching at the door, like claws on wood. We froze, the blood draining from our faces as we exchanged terrified glances. With trembling hands, I reached for the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. I swung the door open, expecting to find nothing. But the darkness outside was impenetrable, a void that seemed to swallow the feeble light from our cabin. That's when we heard it, a low, guttural growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on the forest floor. Whatever was out there was getting closer, and we were trapped with nowhere to run. Panic set in, and we huddled together in the center of the room, praying for dawn to come and banish the horrors of the night. But the darkness seemed to stretch on forever, and with each passing moment, our fear grew stronger. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. I couldn't tell any more, and still, the scratching continued, growing louder and more frenzied with each passing moment. We were trapped, helpless victims of whatever lurked in the shadows outside. And then, just when we thought we couldn't take it anymore, the scratching stopped. Silence fell over the cabin, a suffocating blanket, broken only by the sound of our ragged breaths. For a moment, we dared to hope that it was over, that whatever had been stalking us had moved on. But then came a sound that chilled us to the bone, a low, inhuman moan, echoing through the darkness like a death knell. We knew then that we were not alone, that something evil lurked in the forest, waiting to claim us as its next victims. And as the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, we knew that our nightmare was far from over. We fled from the cabin, leaving behind our belongings and our sanity in our haste to escape. But even as we drove away, the memory of that night haunted us like a ghost, a spectre of terror that would follow us wherever we went. Spring break was supposed to be a time of fun and relaxation, but for us, it became a nightmare that would haunt us for the rest of our days. And as I sit here now, alone in the darkness, I can still hear the echoes of the abyss, calling out to me from the depths of the forest, reminding me that some nightmares never truly end. As we drove away from the cabin, the tension in the car was palpable. No one spoke, each lost in their own thoughts, haunted by the events of the night. The dense forest seemed to swallow us whole, as we raced along the winding road, desperate to put as much distance between us and that accursed place as possible. But no matter how fast we drove, we couldn't outrun the memories of what had transpired. The scratching at the door, the unearthly growls, the feeling of being hunted, all of it lingered like a dark cloud over our heads, threatening to consume us at any moment. We drove 4 hours, the road stretching endlessly before us, until finally we emerged from the forest and into the light of day. The sun was high in the sky, its warmth a welcome relief after the cold terror of the night. We stopped at a roadside diner, hoping to find solace in the familiar comforts of food and drink. But even there, surrounded by the chatter of other patrons and the smell of frying bacon, we couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to us like a second skin. As we ate, we discussed what had happened, trying to make sense of the inexplicable. Some of us believed it was just a trick of the mind, a collective hallucination brought on by stress and fatigue. Others were convinced that we had encountered something truly otherworldly, something beyond our comprehension. But one thing was certain: we would never forget what had happened in that cabin, and we would never be the same again. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but the memory of that spring break horror never faded. It lingered in the back of our minds, a constant reminder of the fragility of our existence and the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of perception. We tried to move on with our lives, to bury the memories deep beneath layers of denial and distraction. But no matter how hard we tried, the memory of that night continued to haunt us, a spectre that refused to be ignored. In the end, we learned to live with the darkness, to accept it as a part of who we were. But deep down, we knew that we could never truly escape the echoes of the abyss, that they would follow us wherever we went, whispering of horrors unseen and unknowable. And as I sit here now, alone in the darkness, I can still hear those whispers, echoing through the depths of my mind like a distant scream. They remind me that some things are better left undisturbed, that there are truths in this world that are better left unspoken. But no matter how hard I try to forget, the memory of that spring break horror will always be with me, a reminder of the thin line that separates the light from the darkness, the known from the unknowable. And as I stare out into the night, I can't help but wonder what other horrors lie waiting in the shadows, just beyond the edge of our understanding.